And you and I talked about that yesterday, which is the difference between the things that you're doing internally to leverage AI, to make things more efficient, to save money, to save time, to improve operations, versus the public domain of AI, which is pulling data and information from the outside and bringing it in. There's so many really interesting areas to go into with regard to marketing and advertising and leveraging AI and all these other different solutions. But just your quick thoughts. I know you're spending a lot of time traveling around the country at these different events and conferences. What are you hearing in terms of the impact of AI and compliance?
Yeah, I think that the SEC, well, everybody's struggling because it impacts a lot of different parts of the business. Almost every operation that you have within the business of executing on investing for clients, AI can be implemented in many different places. So I think from the SEC's perspective, what we're hearing, right, is that it comes down to...
Well, hello there and welcome everyone to the Advisor's Edge podcast. I'm your host, Rob Jacomen, and I am here with my co-host, Chad Ramberg. How's it going, Chad?
Rob, it's great to be here today. Yeah, on a beautiful fall Friday. I don't know when this is going to post. It might be closer to winter, but...
Yeah, it was cold. It was chilly here. Fired up, ready to go. We have an absolutely incredible guest to share his wisdom and his insights, and a personal friend of mine that I'm very honored and blessed to have on our podcast. We have Thayne Gould, who is a director, head of marketing and advertising review practice at Vigilant, and an absolutely first-class firm. Vigilant, if anyone doesn't know, is one of the best in the compliance area in the financial services industry, and we are absolutely honored to have you on our show, Thane. So welcome.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you having me here.
Yep. So listen, man, we're going to dive right in. And I mean, you and I are personal friends, and we've known each other for several years now. So I know a little bit about your background and where you came from, but why don't you share with everyone more about your background, where you've been, where you're going, the problems that you help to solve for this industry, and who you solve it for.
Sure. So thanks, Rob. So first part of my career, I'm actually a 25-year veteran of the industry. First part of my career, I spent as marketing and product management. And so that in the mid-teens, so I like to refer to myself now as a reformed marketer. But in the mid-teens, opportunity presented itself for compliance world, and in the marketing product management, really, it's a whole lot of creative problem solving. And I found that in compliance world, what you're trying to do is take an open framework. There are some rules of the road that are specifically laid out for you, but you're trying to take an open framework and apply that to a business and operationalize something that is repeatable for a business to help comply with a certain set of rules. And found that the compliance world was a growth business because the number of rules and the changing dynamic of the business and the business lines and the operations that any type of investment advisor is in, the things that they're trying to do, along with a changing technology landscape and new rules and regulations, just made it a growth business. There's no set of challenges, right? It's just a growing set of challenges. What we did yesterday is not going to help us with what we're doing today. So I spent that time working at some pretty well-known large investment firms. And then some time after that, as I moved it through compliance and I started to develop my compliance knowledge and experience and work history, I moved into some boutique investment advisors. And then that ultimately led me to Vigilant, where Vigilant, what we do is we are an outsourced CCO for investment advisors. We have our own broker dealer as well that helps with distribution and underwriting for 40 Act funds and registered products, other registered products. But what we do is we help advisors. Typically, our sweet spot is in a couple of 100 million SEC registered investment advisors that are a couple 100 million in size up to, say, $1 billion. And that they come to us for their compliance support. And we do all sorts of everything in their compliance program, from the named CCO to various types of tasks executing, because it's a lot of infrastructure that goes into helping the investment advisor set up their compliance program. So we do from soup to nuts, everything that they need to do for their compliance programs.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm curious on your title there. So marketing review and what have you. You're actually, what it sounds like is what you're really helping with is taking that side from the compliance side and reviewing the marketing and program for the clients you're serving. Is that right? It's not marketing for Vigilant. You're actually helping them market better. Is that right?
Right. As from your other conversations, right? There's a lot of complexity. I mean, that's the heart of what this conversation about is helping advisors get their story out in the marketplace. And there is a lot of complex rules that have to be followed that are principles based, but they don't necessarily tell you exactly line for line what you have to do to comply with the rule. And so what we do in helping our clients is perform that review from beginning to end. So that's a review of what their policies and procedures look like, to how are they operationalizing, how are they making it repeatable, because it's not your marketing message and getting your marketing message out to the marketplace is never just, all right, I've done it once, I have this one thing, and then we can just do that over and over again. It's dynamic. And it's always new things coming along, new message coming along, new ways of distributing that message. And there's a whole host of things that an advisor needs to do, from the review of the materials beforehand to record keeping that's required, that archiving of materials that are being distributed, to archiving of the communications between when they go out on one of these technology platforms and the social media platforms, and the way that they distribute that message and archiving of that thing that's gone out. You created this great message and now it's being pushed out into the world, and archiving it related to it being out in the world, right? And then there's a whole host of things that need to be considered and infrastructure that needs to be put into place. And then it's helping, them understand, because it's not just the two of you that are creating a message or the advisor themselves that is creating the message. It's a whole host of people that are behind the scenes inside the advisor that create that message, and they need to understand as well. And we're just a few years into the introduction of new rules related to that, of which that new guidance is coming out every day for what do they mean by what they've said, what does the SEC mean by what they've said in the rule, and what do we do about it? How do you, it's great, they give you some guidance, but then what do you do about it? And we help advisors figure that out and implement that, and put all along the way the infrastructure they need to be able to support everything.
Wow. That's like, that's unbelievable, because you and I, Thane, you and I have had some conversations privately where we talk about the big problems in the industry and the constraints and the bottlenecks. And so I'm actually just going to cut right to the chase, because that's just the way I am. The other day I made a post on LinkedIn and I was tongue in cheek about it, but I was actually pretty serious when I said, it seems at times like things like compliance and process and systems and infrastructure and all this kind of, I look at them as constraints, because they can be bottlenecks. They can be constraints to getting to where you want to go as an advisor. So here's my question for you, Thane, is most of these advisors, if you were to really talk to them and have a heart to heart with them, they just want to grow their business. Mm-hmm. They want to grow their business. They want to impact people's lives. They want to transform people's lives in a positive way. But sometimes that compliance can be the sales prevention department. And I joke about that, like sales prevention department, but I'm being serious, that sometimes that can be a hindrance to growth. So from your experience and your perspective, what's the thing that is really driving that philosophy or that thought process? Like, man, I just want to grow. I feel held back by, I can't do this, I can't do that. Or, man, this is going through such a long process to get this approved. What do you say to the financial advisor who is maybe has those feelings or is thinking like that right now?
Well, I think it's a partnership for the various aspects of the business, and that it's not a no. We have a framework we can follow, and there's not necessarily a full prescription for every aspect of what you need to do, but there has to be some thought put into how you do it and how you execute on it. Because at the end of the day, the RIA firm has some responsibilities that it has to meet. And that the advisors are the field advisors, the folks that are on the ground, the folks that are servicing and facing off with clients, that they're doing a great job and they have great ideas about how to do things. And they are in touch with this ever changing landscape of ways to connect with people. And I think that the rub comes when trying to meet some of the requirements with this ever changing landscape and making it repeatable. And that's where the partnership comes in, is that there has to be some time invested in making sure that the business needs to be mindful, right? Like that we have to get the message out, but how can we do it in a repeatable way? And make sure that we have the right guardrails in place. And sometimes I don't think that part of the equation moves as quickly because there has to be thought behind it as might be necessary. But as long as there's some understanding between the advisor and the home office, as it were, right? Like that we have to, make some effort to do this thing. And because there's always going to be a struggle, because things come with cost, right? There's a way to execute on it, but there's sometimes some build has to be put into place and things like that. And there can be a medium that's found, right? Like that, a middle ground for everyone. And
Yeah, I like
it to happen in order to make it happen.
Yep. Yeah, I like how you talk about having guardrails in there. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I want to dig a little bit into that, because what I'm hearing is some specific, I don't know if you'd say talents or expertise that you have in that. And one reason I bring this up, because as an insurance broker, when we're working with clients, I think this thing, we're agnostic with who they work with as a compliance expert. But what we really want more than anything, and you guys are great, but what we really want more than anything is that they choose a compliance expert so they can have the guardrails there. And that can mean a lot of different things depending on what that firm needs. And so what I really like, and the essence of my question here is really when you're digging into where Vigilant is really good, and or maybe where Thane, you're really good at helping out, what is that aspect? It sounds like because of your experience in the marketing world, you really understand that, hey, when we're marketing, we're just really going out there trying to, plant the seeds and get things going in the business world. But you also recognize the value of quality compliance. Can you talk about when an advisor is saying, hey, I'm looking for the right fit, where does that right fit really come in for you?
So I think one, we bring perspective, right? And where we work with our clients. And two is our approach is to help me get you to yes, right? And how we can do this. And so at the end of the day, we're looking at it we can bring what the regulator's perspective is from our experience from facing off with a regulator and understanding how are they looking at this. And then so based on how they're looking at this, how do we bridge the gap between that and how the advisor is looking at this? Mm-hmm. And so there's a little bit of art in translation between the two. And you have to ask sometimes some questions, some probing questions, is what are you trying to do? What are you trying to say? Where is this going to be used? What's your end goal? What are you trying to get out of this? And by asking some of those questions sometimes, right, we can help a client, and we're not just the no department. We can help a client get to a solution. And maybe it's not exactly as they were originally thinking about it, but we can get them to a place that helps them accomplish maybe 4 of the top 5 goals that they might have originally had in mind, or something along those lines.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, you're really trying to be the yes department. How can we get to a yes? Yeah.
Not the sales prevention department.
Yeah. Sometimes there's hard no's, right? Like, absolutely can't do that. You have to do this, right? There's certain examples of that, say for ways that you have to present your performance. There's rules of the road you have to follow. There's specifics that were laid out in, but maybe the way that it gets presented, the graphics that are around it, that, how it gets distributed, where it gets distributed, what you say, what's the narrative that goes around it, like maybe have some flexibility there, right? But we try to get them to a place, that they can do what they want to do, or at least what they were originally thinking.
Right.
You said something interesting yesterday to me, Thane, as we were talking about prepping for our episode today. You talked about there's always a couple bad eggs in the, that spoil everything for everybody else. What specifically is the SEC looking out for? So if you're speaking to financial advisors right now, what is on the SEC's hit list as far as what they are looking for and how they are scrutinizing specifically social media content as it relates to the messaging and the story that these financial advisors want to put out there to the world, with the goal and the intent of building trust, educating prospects, and the potential of bringing in new clients into the firm?
Well, so social media first, like, take a look, step back for a second, and it's really just a new mechanism to get the message out, right? There are some new aspects to it that maybe are different than some of the other ways that we communicate. It's different than email. It's different than your old blog. It's different than a website. It has aspects of all those different things. But at the end of the day, it's a tool to push a message out. But it has some overlap with communication directly with an individual, and the way that the individuals that are the recipient of the message, they interact with the message, right? The framework for what an advisor has to do already existed, right? You have a responsibility to have guardrails around the crafting of the message to go out. You have responsibilities around archiving of the message, and then you have responsibilities around supervising the message, right? It's no different. There's some different aspects of it because you're maybe what you would have said in person in the way we interact individually when we're talking versus what was in print. There's a combination of the two there, but the guardrails as far as what you're saying, they're the same. That you have to not be misleading in what you're saying. And that's really what the SEC is concerned about, making sure that you have the right structure in place and that you're not misleading the end investor in any way. And so that if you think about it from that perspective, we just need to go back and adapt some of the things that we were doing with what we might have put into a pitch book or a mass distributed email. The same concepts apply, that if you're pushing out mass emails, what would we have done there? Well, if we're crafting a message that would go onto a social media platform, what would we do there? They're not that far apart. So think about it that way. And then the other part is just being able to capture it. And that's the difference, I think, and what some organizations struggle with is because with emails that we would push out that we controlled because it was inside your 4 walls, and you controlled the email domain and the email distribution and all of those things. And it was very easy for you to put infrastructure in place to capture and then supervise and have review of those materials. When it goes out on someone else's platform, that's different. And that's part of the struggle, is meeting that responsibility, but making sure. And then also is the volume of which could go out. because social media kind of democratizes everything. And if you have 20 people in a firm and they are all pushing out messages, the volume of information that you have to look at and you are responsible for has just grown exponentially.
Yep.
And then if all 20 of those people are interacting with individuals in the comments and then in direct messaging, it grows even further so it becomes a resource issue for firms to be able to control that. So the individual thinks I'm just having one-on-one conversation, but the firm has to think about what is the bigger picture in all the interactions that are happening, and how do I make sure what my person is saying, because everything is recorded now too. I'm not just meeting you at a coffee shop and we're having a conversation, and maybe some things it's like really the only recording you have of that is whatever handouts were left behind. Instead, every aspect of the conversation is captured, and that makes some people uncomfortable.
Well, let me ask you an example about a specific example that I had in mind. Let's say you have a financial advisor, because let's make this real. Let's make a real live situation. You have a financial advisor who wants to grow his or her presence on LinkedIn, and with the intent of building their client base. They're like, hey, you know what? LinkedIn sounds like a great platform for me to connect with people that are my avatar, start to build that trust, start to engage in conversations and communications. And you know what? Every single day, I want to post one piece of really valuable content that I think is really going to resonate with my ideal client profile. How would you, as a compliance as a professional in advising that person, what kind of steps would you have to go through as a firm to ensure that individual advisor, that everything that they're putting out there in terms of in their ecosystem, in their world, is kind of fits into those guardrails? What kind of frameworks or strategy would you recommend that a firm has to be able to still accomplish the end goal and allow that person some freedom and flexibility of like building their practice, but at the same time having those constraints in place where it's like, wait a minute, we're not going to just push out content just for the sake of doing content. It has to have a game plan and a strategy behind it. What would you recommend to someone who's in their shoes where they want to build up their personal brand?
Yeah. So it just can't be the Wild West. That structure, you need structure. And so, but there still has to be flexibility. We can't think that the message can be prepackaged all the time, because that's just not feasible. And so how do we slice that? And I think it's spending a little bit of time, and this is where partnership in different parts of the business comes in, that marketing can prepackage, let's just say for discussion purposes, 80% of what that message is, right? And prepackages that and gives that to an advisor. And then the advisor stays within the guardrails of what's in that prepackaged message that they can then push out, right? Because social media, too, partly, I think, is a drip effort, right? Like if I get my message out, then at some point I'm going to get mind space and traction. So, but it has to be fresh, but it doesn't necessarily always have to be of the moment at that moment, right? And then then there's some other timely stuff, right? And then we can use our resources, both compliance and marketing, in a more thoughtful manner instead of a fully reactive, here's the notes, the latest updated message, and then it becomes, right? It's about resource use internally. Do a little planning ahead, have some prepackaged things that marketing and compliance can spend some time on, and make sure that they're good, put some structure in place around that. And then the other part of the time, there may be events that trigger something is hot, something is in the news, some event has occurred that maybe then we can tailor it and make it a little bit more timely, right? Then it appears thoughtful, and then we can get our message out. And then, right, like we're not always the marketing resources and the compliance resources are not just always reacting to something. They spend a little time, ahead, that they've got some things that they can pull off of the shelf. And then a much smaller portion of their time is spent on those timely type of things.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's fascinating. Can you do it? Because I mean, when we're talking about social media, part of the value of whoever's watching, consuming the information is that it's social, right? And so when you're an advisor, I remember when I was an advisor, I was like, oh yeah, if I could just post this and show them so they know I'm real and this is what my personality is like, and they may connect with me personally, socially, right? So do you have a structure that you can do that, where you have the structure in place where you can augment or bring alongside that personality of the individual when presenting it?
Yeah, I think that's fair too, that maybe those things are not always, it's a presence thing, and making sure that everyone is comfortable. I think you can put some guardrails there and allow for some free form that is, and this is the other part of the structure that needs to be in place. There is the message that the advisor gives, right? And when the home office, the registered investment advisor, right, they're primarily concerned with talking about their products and services. How do we talk about our products and services? What are we saying about our performance? What are we saying about our strategies? I think what you're talking about falls a little bit more into personality, right? And that they can add a little bit of free form there, and they don't necessarily have to be talking about the advisor's products and strategies and performance. And you can allow a little bit more, but the other part of that, and where people struggle, is making sure you still have your record keeping requirements that you have to meet there.
I see.
Making sure that's archived, and then the supervision portion of that, and making sure it's reviewed and you're checking it. And there's things that you can do to, if you're putting the right structure in place, and right infrastructure in place, that those things that are free form can bubble up to the top to be reviewed on the back end, right? And so there's a way to slice it to make it repeatable, give a little bit of flexibility. But, some thought has to be put on the front end, and a partnership between the frontline advisors and marketing and compliance to find the overlap and put the right things in place.
So you're saying there is a chance. Sorry, that's a quote from, I just showed my age.
Familiar with that quote. Yep.
I would agree with that.
It's one of my favorite classic movies of all time. Here's something interesting. So we did a podcast episode. Our last one was with Emil, who is an attorney and obviously specializes in a lot of these areas too. And one of the things that came up was this whole idea. He said he was talking about text messaging and how text messaging is really on the radar right now because it's very difficult to control certain types of mediums like text messaging. And the one thing that came up in my mind, Thane, that you were going down this road here, is I want to throw a curveball at you, is on social media, we can start to engage in conversations and interact with prospects in direct messages, DMs, in the comments of our posts, for example. How are those meeting certain requirements for passing that test of within those guardrails? How do you ensure that the conversations that are happening behind the scenes, like in terms of text messaging, direct messages on social media platforms, where someone DMs you and says, hey, your content really resonated with me. I would love to learn more about what you guys do and how you could help me with my portfolio. That's the question I had for you, is what do you do about those gray areas that are very difficult to control and yet still maintain some level of flexibility and freedom and really do things in a way that maintains that level of integrity and compliance?
Well, here's where I think the business is struggling at the moment. And there's a disconnect between what the requirements are and what some parts of distribution in the business want to do. And it's so the reality is you can, but you have to have some, I keep going back to infrastructure and guardrails in place, right? And so this is where you need to be thoughtful, because there's always cost that's involved, right? So there is infinite number of places that we can connect and we can message with one another and communicate. There's endless apps. We all have iMessage. We all have text messages. We all have, there's the social media platforms, infinite number of social media platforms. So what's a business to do? Sure, you can communicate there and you can push your message out in any one of these places, but you have a requirement to capture it. And guess what comes along with capturing it? Cost. Because there's technology solutions that'll go out and connect and bring the messages in, and then you have to have oversight over that. So there's cost that's involved with getting it into one of the archives. And then there's people cost with having oversight, because if you're messaging on all these places, you've got a mountain of information and somebody has to take a look at it.
Mm.
All right. So that's where partnership comes in. You have to talk and say, that's just impossible, right? Like you couldn't take it all in and be in all places at all times. That just doesn't make sense. So the question becomes, excuse me, where do we want to do this that we get the best return for interacting and finding people and connecting with people that are either A, our clients, or B, could be our clients? So there has to be some analysis to talk about that, because you just can't possibly be every place all the time. And then so once you figure that out, then you can put the other parts in place to capture what that looks like, or capture it in your archives and then put supervision in place. Now, I understand some of the challenges too with communicating across a spectrum of people, prospects, and clients as well. Younger are going to skew more towards technology, older may not, in general, right? It's not an absolute, but it's in general terms. Older, more traditional ways, right? Much easier to manage, or maybe easier to manage, or some of the infrastructure is already in place to support all of that. So the rub comes is that we all have these devices in our hands, and are they company devices? Are they personal devices?
Mm.
And if they're company devices, what kind of communication is going to be there? Most likely just business related, a lot easier to capture because the company controls all parts of that technology stack, right? They can say what apps can be on there. They can tell you what apps can't be on there. They can capture all of the electronic communications. And then, but if it's a personal device, and most people are not going to want to have their personal communications all captured by the firm and in the firm's archives. And so then when we're having our communications, and what really needs to be captured is the business communication. But where is the line between the business communication and the personal communication? Mm. Right? Everything you and I talk about may not be, it's 20% business related to me as providing service as an investment advisor, and the other 80% is not. And it's not important. But the rub comes is when the two blend, because you've got the first part of the communication and then the second part of the communication. I really only need the second part of the communication, but how do I flip a switch and make sure the second part of the communication got in there? And then if you leave it to the front line to make that decision, the lines get blurred and it becomes difficult to be able to capture. So this is not an easy thing to unravel. There can be a solution, but it's finding the right support for that solution to allow it to happen and then move people, because inevitably there is going to be some change that's involved. And then moving people to change is always a challenge. And so there are technology platforms to capture texting, but I do it in iMessage and now I need to do it over here. And how do I get over there? And then you got to tell client, contact me over here. And the other thing too is like, there's no switch that gets flipped to make the change. Everybody has to buy in and make the transition to this new place, right? And so it's a reinforcement thing, and that's always difficult for firms to do, is the reinforcement. I need you to do this. I need you to do this. And helping people make that move is always a challenge. It needs to there has to be a commitment behind it and constant reminders, and eventually we'll get to a place where it's different.
Good old-fashioned change management is what you're talking about.
That's what this boils down to, is bigger picture. What does it look like? What is most effective for me? Where is my best spend on this? And then move people to that place.
Yeah, the beauty of what you're bringing in there is, with a good plan, you can get better at making sure you're taking those resources and putting them in an area where you're going to be most effective, is what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's no magic. There's this silver bullet that solves everything, because everyone is going to be different. Depending on what your strategy is and who your, as Rob said, like avatar is, there could be different platforms that are better than others. And you have to spend some time thinking about that, and then making it available to your people, and then putting some of these other things in place. And that's where I think the challenge is thinking about, it's multi-step, multi-dimensional, that there's a lot of things that have to be done in order to, but there's a model, right? You can put a model in place and help get people and reduce the risk that something that you're not intending to happen happens.
Yeah. I think the bottom line is, what I'm hearing you say, Thane, is it really requires a strategy and communication, and bringing those key players together in your organization and executing a game plan and strategy that works within those guardrails. And there's going to have to be some flexibility as far as, hey, you know what? Regulations are going to change. They're changing. They're ever changing, right? So we need to be able to pivot and move and adapt and change the game plan, maybe become more tactical, but still maintain those guardrails within the painting the lines between what's, in your world, I guess you use I lost my train of thought here, so I'll have to cut this out. But where I'm trying to go with this is, you have to have a game plan, you have to have a strategy, and you have to have really good communication between all the key players in your organization in order to make this work. And with that, there's a cost. There's some cost associated with that. But still, I think we haven't even talked about AI, impact of AI on the regulatory environment and how that is ever changing. And you and I talked about that yesterday, which is the difference between the things that you're doing internally to leverage AI to make things more efficient, to save money, to save time, to improve operations, versus the public domain of AI, which is pulling data and information from the outside and bringing it in. There's so many really interesting areas to go into with regard to marketing and advertising and leveraging AI and all these other different solutions. But just your quick thoughts. I know you're spending a lot of time traveling around the country at these different events and conferences. What are you hearing in terms of the impact of AI and compliance?
Yeah, I think that the SEC, well, everybody's struggling because it impacts a lot of different parts of the business. Almost every operation that you have within the business of executing on investing for clients, AI can be implemented in many different places. So I think from the SEC's perspective, what we're hearing, right, is that it comes down to disclosure. Are you disclosing how you're using to your clients, how you're using AI and using the technology to your clients? And are you doing that? Are you making all of the complete and thorough disclosure to your clients? Two, how are you marketing your use of AI? Because that it is hot. We have to recognize that, and that it's starting to creep into marketing message. We use AI in a certain way, and this impacts our investment strategy in a certain way. And are you doing that in a misleading way? Are you in fact doing what you're saying you're doing? And is your AI, however you may be using it, right, is it real? Then there's the internal controls, and this is the part that you were talking about, Rob, in that how do we know what we're getting out of it is accurate from the data sources and the underlying algorithm, what it's pointing to and the inputs and the parts of the process it's driving, whether that's how it interacts with clients, if you're using a bot in a certain way, are you using it in your investment process? How is that working? What do you what parts of the investment process, and how do we make sure that doesn't present some sort of conflict for clients? And does someone have oversight? Because you can't just turn it on and let it go and then, oh, wait a minute, something happened somewhere down the road. There has to be some sort of watching, making sure, testing, on an ongoing basis, because machines break from time to time. Mm-hmm. That's the nature, it happens. And then I think too, concentration, because there could be confidence and misleading clients. There could be some downfall there, but also in operation of the markets. And if everybody's leveraging the same technology from the big players in the AI space, and it's all driving the same processes, if something breaks one place, what is that going to do with the operation of the markets? And what impact is that going to have in the operation of the markets? I mean, there was just a snafu in the release, what did we have? Airport issues and plane issues, because technology went down because there was a patch that was released, and the patch caused problems. Right. When everybody's relying on the same technology, that could have devastating consequences if somebody flips the wrong switch someplace. And so, I think that's the focus. But that is going to take some years to play out. Some of it because no one is really sure. Most advisors right now are experimenting with what they do and trying to figure out the details from, as we had talked about, Rob, what is it pointing to? What are your data sets? Do I control that? What confidence do I have in the integrity of the data? Because the integrity of the data that it's pointing to is going to drive what the outputs are. And so is it outside? Is it inside my four walls? How much control over it? How much confidence can I have in it? And then two, I think the front line, really, the easiest thing to change is the marketing message, right? And if I switch on a co-pilot someplace, right, can I say, in fact, that I'm doing some AI technology and get out in front of everyone else? And that could potentially be misleading. And so, this is going to play out over some time.
There's just sometimes there's things that AI cannot replace a human.
Right.
Thank God.
This is a great example. There's a reason why we have advisors who are building those relationships with people one-on-one, having real human interaction. There's think there's always going to be a place for that because we are relationship driven human beings, and technology is just a tool. It's just a tool to help us become better, make more money, become more efficient, save time, save money. Those are the advantages of leveraging technology. But like anything, it can be abused and it can mislead people, and it can be your data sources might not be accurate, and ChatGPT might have a hallucination tomorrow when you're putting a prompt in there. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, this isn't the output. And Thing, you said something so interesting yesterday was the output is only as good as the inputs in any kind of system or operation. And that includes AI, because at the end of the day, humans are the ones that are training this technology to do what we think we want it to do. And then the outputs are going to only be what we're putting into it. So that becomes a critical piece. And then there's a whole human element to that, as far as what I see is compliance and ethics and doing things the right way. There's a whole area right there. By the way, I think it's an amazing business opportunity for anybody who is really smart with AI to be a consultant and really advise financial advisors on the implications of AI and technology and how it's going to impact their firms. I mean, I know there's people out there who do that, but I think this is a new and emerging area that I think has a lot of promise and I'm thinking about the younger generation. Man, if you want to get into this industry, that would be amazing, is to blend these two things together, and what an enormous value you would be to an entire industry.
No, I agree. Yeah. There are things that we don't have answers for yet, and we're going to continue to wrestle with. And it's a shifting landscape because the technology changes faster than sometimes we can come up with solutions.
Well, I think I think this probably is a great segue, Thane, into our next and final, as we land the plane here, the next and final question. But I think there's just so much opportunity and a continuation of this conversation as things are new and emerging, especially in the area of SEC and compliance and AI and marketing, how this whole landscape is changing so much. I think it would be amazing to have you back on our podcast at another time to see where we left off, what's changed, what's new, what are some new insights, what do financial advisors need to be aware of that's happening in the marketplace right now. And that's why it's so valuable to have somebody with your level of expertise and knowledge and experience in this industry. I think having you on here has been an invaluable experience for us. And Chad, should we ask Thane my favorite question?
Yeah, we always need to. I'm a good consistency guy, and it's always we learn something we didn't expect. So let's do that.
I'll let you run with this one, Chad. I mean, I talk so much. I want to give you the chance here you're actually the best one that does this. So I'm going to.
Okay. Thane, I do want to thank you for being here. It is great. And we've gone really deep in some really important subjects, which is really cool, which is one of the great things about doing this podcast. And personally, we always like to dig into a little bit and understanding you more. When you're looking back, you're sitting on the porch or you're out on the veranda and you're thinking back over a life well lived. And you say you can take one of two approaches. How did you finish well? And or what are people going to say about this is what Thane did, which is really important? What do you want that to look like?
Well, first, thank you guys for having me on. I've really enjoyed the opportunity, and I would welcome another opportunity to come on again. So please don't hesitate to ask. And as I look back, I think at the end of the day, right, like we're trying to help people achieve goals in this business, and that I want to help. Everything is a relationship here. And you have to, because investing isn't, and particularly when it comes to people's savings, it's inherently emotional. And so you have to give people confidence and that you're going to do right by them. And I'm just hoping that I've been kind to some folks, and inside the business, in my contribution to helping others save and grow, and that I've helped others within the business and do the right thing, because at the end of the day, like, we're all just trying to grow the pie. And if I can do that, and I'm remembered for being nice to some folks and helping them get and achieve something and solve a problem of some sort, that's good enough for me.
Love it. That's great.
Love it. Well, Thane, is as a friend and also as a fellow colleague and professional in this industry, obviously we're in different worlds, but yet we're all coming together as one. I truly am grateful and honored to have you on our podcast, and I'd love to have you on again. And I know I speak for Chad in this too. It's just this is one of the most fascinating, to me personally, this is one of the most fascinating areas of this business, is really in the area of growth and marketing and helping people succeed and win every single day. Like, that's part of my passion. Is I just want to see everybody win. And when we're successful and we can help make a difference in the life of somebody else and helping them succeed, we're going to naturally be successful. And it's just the way the world works. And this is what I love about this forum and this format, is be able to share stories, share inspiration, share insights to help you be better. And I know Chad shares those sentiments too. So Thane, how can we find out, if somebody's watching or listening right now, how can they find out more about Vigilant and also connect with you personally? And if they would need any of your help or your guidance in doing what you do, how can people reach you?
Yeah, so I'm available on LinkedIn, but we also have Vigilant's website, vigilant.com, that has all of our profiles and contact information.
Awesome. I will put all the links as well as the show notes. I'll put all the links to reach out to Thane. If anyone would find it in them that Thane's message resonates with you and you want to reach out to him and talk with them about how they could potentially help you, I'll put all those notes in there, as well as the link to the Vigilant website, and then we'll just take it from there. So Thane, thank you again so much. And we're just so honored to have you on, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Advisor's Edge podcast. All right, guys, have a great one.
You too. Thanks, guys.